Hello my quilting friends, Leah Day here with a new video for the machine quilting block party. Today we're going to learn how to machine quilt our second block, the blazing sawtooth. So let's get started. So I'm getting started stitching in the ditch. I've already ditched around the center square and I've bounced around the triangles. Watch out for the triangle points. These areas have a lot of different seam allowances coming together, and they can be a little tricky. They can hang up your foot and you can start stitching in the same place without even noticing. So just stitch in the ditch carefully. I'm just taking it slow, especially as I come close to this point. I'm going to stop it with the needle in the down position, rotate the block around, reposition my hands in order to make that direction change. And it's when I was moving off of that point that I noticed my foot would sometimes hang up on it. If you find that happening to you, lift up on your presser foot, or if you have a knee lifter, lift up ever so slightly, and that can kind of help you jump over that thick area. And with something like this, we've got yellow on this side and the background on the other. I'm quilting with white thread, so if my ditching got off, I'd rather veer off to the background color rather than to stitch on the yellow where it might be noticeable. Sometimes it's nice to have a, permission to jump off in one direction or the other. So I stitched in the ditch and also knocked out a few of my straight lines in that triangle shape. And now I'm going to fill in the red square in the center with zippling. Now zippling is just straight lines and sharp angles. And I didn't mark it on the block because this is one of those filler designs that you can stitch without marking. So I'm just stitching straight lines and sharp angles like zigzaggy shapes, coming to a point, and then stitching back. And I'm going to fill in this square working roughly in a row. I'm going to fill it in from left to right, and then when I get filled in to this edge, I'll rotate the block around so that way I can fill either straight down or from right to left. It really just depends on what feels most natural for you. You can hear when my foot is hitting lots of different seam allowances. It might be a sign to slow down a little bit. Your foot might get hung up on those edges. Okay, so I've quilted from left to right, and now I'm going to rotate the block just like this, and I'm going to stitch straight down, interlocking this zippling with the zippling before. And I'm stitching this roughly on a 1/2 inch scale. My lines are a little closer together than a 1/2 inch, but that's okay. So I worked another row of zippling across, and then I stopped because my machine was running really loud, and I decided it was time to take the whole thing apart, dig down into the bobbin case, and clean out the bobbin area. And that's just an action learning tip there for you. If your machine is running really loud, it's definitely a sign you need to brush out your bobbin area and clean it up a little bit. Put a little oil maybe in that area, and that really helps. So now I'm going to finish up the zippling in this area, and occasionally I'm going to have to use the ditches to travel stitch. So it's not a big deal, just simply stitch right along that ditch, branch into the area with more zippling, just straight lines and sharp angles, zigzagging into that area. You can see how I'm matching that up with the other design. I've roughly kept it consistent. It's a little smaller than a 1/2 inch scale, but I'm not worried about this being dense on my quilt since it's a very small area. That's just a small square filled with one design. So the next step of this block is to quilt the straight lines. Now I'm just going to stitch straight to that point. I'm going to be careful not to get hung up in this area. Even if I have to kind of stitch up to it but not directly into the point, that's just fine. Sometimes if you know something's going to be hard on your needle or your machine just doesn't like stitching into that area, just avoid it. Okay, I can stitch that one more line, and I've been playing with this and there's not really a good way to travel stitch. I'll end up out here and I need to be over here. So what I think I'm going to do is stitch that straight line right down the center and then travel stitch right back along that line. So I'm going to stitch into the triangle, come close to the tip, and then just carefully travel stitch back right along that line. Now you don't have to do it that way. If you wanted to, you could change this up completely and stitch like a wiggly line, like a little wiggly flame shape into that area and come back. That would be fine too. This is just the way that kind of made the most sense to me. And it's also a little bit less travel stitching. If I ended up over here and had to travel stitch all the way down and over, that's just a lot more of that kind of slow, careful stitching than I'd like to have to do. And personally, I think it's a little less noticeable if I wobbled off this line. I don't think that that would be too noticeable. It might even look intentional because I'm building up thread in that area. So I'm just going to keep working my way around, hitting every single triangle shape, filling in the lines just like that. So our center star is quilted, and now it's time to quilt the background, and I'm going to fill this area with a design called Fuse Fire. I want to stitch it fairly big. It starts with a long wiggly line. You're going to travel stitch back along that line. Now you're going to branch out, just pivot and branch out with an echo, coming to a point, kind of like a flame shape. I'm going to work my way back down, just echoing back down to that starting point. And now I'm just going to keep wiggling up this side, travel stitching against my ditch line of this triangle until I've expanded a few times. Now I have not stitched that ditch quite yet. I might want to go on ahead and take the opportunity to do that. Sometimes as I'm going in a block, I don't ditch everything before when I first get started. I wait until I hit a line with my quilting, and then I take the opportunity to ditch it and get it secure. So I'm just going to take a quick second here, ditch this triangle, and then I'll get back to my design. So now I can just branch out and do more wiggly echoes into this area. So I'm just going to branch out and build this up until it fills in that space nicely. The trick with all filler designs that are like this is figuring out how to fill them in a space that makes sense and still shows off the texture beautifully. And you don't have to sit here and count and do the exact same number of echoes on one side as the other. It's not really necessary. The design's kind of being cut off by the triangle, so it's just fine like this. So now moving on with the design, I'm going to branch out with another wiggly line in this direction. I curl it downward. Again, travel stitch all the way back to the starting point. I've got lots of space here to pivot and echo and kind of curl my wiggly flame shape down into that area. Okay, notice that I'm coming back to my starting point here. I really want to build up thread in that area. It just adds to the design. It makes it look more interesting. As I expand the echoes, I can bring them out and have them fill in more space by elongating that tip and having it come down into that area. Now I've got this little space left, so I'm going to kind of wiggle next to it and then also bouncing and travel stitch in the ditch whenever I need to. Bouncing back out again. Now here's something tricky. I haven't marked my flames that are in the border, and it'll be really, really easy to forget that that's what I'm stitching over here. So if you need to, grab your fabric marking pencil and mark a line here between the block and the border so that way you remember not to stitch over that. Ask me how I know. It's really easy to get distracted as you're quilting kind of in the flow of everything, that you forget what you're stitching where and take your design out further than you intended. Okay, so I think
that's enough echoes for that shape. I'm going to form another shape coming this way. So again, start with that wiggly line, travel stitch back, and notice that I'm not being super careful about that travel stitching. If it's sloppy, that's okay. It's really not going to be a big deal. It might even add to the design a little bit. So now I'm going to echo it, and again, I'm going to do the exact same thing I did on the other side. I hit my triangle, I'm in the ditch, go on ahead and knock it out, stitch it in the ditch, get it secure, and then get back to your design. Okay, stitched everything in the ditch, now wiggling on back. If you're ever, wondering if you should come back further or connect with anything, rotate your block around so you can see. There's no rule that says that you have to put your quilt on the machine and just leave it in one direction. You can always flip things around and take a look if you need to. So I'm going to travel stitch back at this point and fill in this side. You may have some odd spaces, like this little weird gappy area. I'm just going to fill this in with gently flowing curves, just echoing this particular shape, but I could also just as easily echo this shape too. It really honestly doesn't matter. Like I said, filling in these little areas is more about just kind of going with what you think looks best than any particular rhyme or rule. I think that looks great. So I've quilted all the way around the star shape in the center of the block, and now I'm kind of matching up this area where I've got the fused fire from before and the fused fire that we started with. And here's the best way to match this up so it really works well, and that is just to mark out and figure out what you're going to do with this remaining area. So I'm going to mark out my little wiggly line and then fill in the echoes, and this is something that is really important to do anytime that you have kind of a question mark with an area. If you're confused about how to quilt it, how to fill it in properly, grab a marking pencil and figure it out. Get it marked so that way you don't have that question, and then also you have less chance of making a mistake, having a stitch off, and then having to rip it. So now that I've got this marked, I can easily stitch it. I'm going to stitch down with my wiggly line first and travel stitch back. I'm going to get back to this end, travel stitch just a bit, and echo around. The marked lines really do make a big difference. It's super easy to just get distracted, especially when you've got a little tight, odd space to fill. It's easy to get distracted and accidentally do something weird in that area, and then, you kind of feel that hesitation. Should you rip it out or not? So now I'm going to work my way back in here. I've got this little section, and really what I kind of did with this was I just kind of filled it in with some echoing lines, and that's a-okay. Travel stitch here to connect with this line. Sometimes you're going to have little odd spaces that are not going to be consistent with the rest of the area. You won't have enough space to stitch a whole fused fire shape. So you're just going to have to stitch some gently curving lines, and that will fill it up just fine. So I'm over here, I've got one more line to hit, so I'm going to travel stitch right through here. Just travel stitch right on top of my stitching. That's another thing that's absolutely allowed with this design. You can definitely travel stitch as much as you need to. And what travel stitching allows us to do is simply go from one area to another without having to break thread. Okay, so I ended up in this triangle really conveniently placed, so I can go on ahead and knock out these straight lines. Just move straight down to that corner. And then straight back out. If you need to, rotate the block around so you can see what you're doing. Right here I'm stitching right in the ditch, so it just made sense to turn it real quick and be able to stitch that nice and straight. As I come down, I could go on ahead and knock out this triangle too. That's just fine. And again, if you need to, pivot it around You can clearly see what you're stitching. And also, if you want to change up the design too, that's open to you as well. You could fill in these triangles instead of doing straight lines. You could do wiggly lines. Really, it's entirely up to you. When I was designing the quilting design, I kind of wanted to have one element kind of consistently be in all the different blocks, so it would appear again and again, and that I decided to be straight lines. So in all of our blocks we're going to have some element of straight lines, and then when we go to put the quilt together, it will really look very cohesive. The quilting design will kind of be really consistent throughout the entire quilt. Okay, so now we've knocked out the entire background area with fuse fire. We started to knock out these straight lines and the triangles, and I'm out here on this border. Haven't had to break thread yet. This is really great. So the next step is to start knocking out our little flame border. And again, I really minimize my marking. I just did the dots. So what I'm doing as I stitch this is I'm just wiggling up. It's just a wiggly line, hitting that dot, wiggling back. And it's just a simple back and forth motion. If this doesn't feel natural to you though, a straight line will look just as good. You could also use this area to try lots of different design ideas. It's really entirely up to you. I like using this because when we go to connect the blocks together, we could even stitch over the connection area and really tie that together because all of the blocks are going to have the same kind of flame border. It's entirely up to you, but I can't wait to see what this is going to look like when we connect all the blocks together at the end.
So that's it for block number 2. I really hope that you've enjoyed learning all of these cool designs over the blazing sawtooth block. Click here to find the patterns for blocks 1 and 2 for the machine quilting block party. It's never too late to join in the fun and learn so much this year about piecing and machine quilting. Until next time, let's go quilt.